The breaking point the Academy's harsh welcome. The massive viewport of Terminus 7 Academy showed the endless expanse of space, dotted with distant stars that seemed to mock Jake Morrison's current predicament. At 20 years old, he was the smallest cadet in Bravo Squadron, standing barely 6 feet tall among beings that towered over him like living mountains. His human frame, lean but not particularly muscular, drew constant stares and whispered comments from his alien classmates. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished his morning physical assessment. The gravity simulation chamber had been set to accommodate the various species in his class, which meant it was nearly crushing for a human. While his Goliathan classmate Thorak had effortlessly completed the obstacle course in under 2 minutes, Jake had struggled through it in nearly 8. The crystalline Vraxian cadets had simply phased through several obstacles, their natural abilities making the course seem like child's play. "Morrison, you're holding up the entire squadron," barked Instructor Zelthara, her voice resonating through the chamber like grinding stone. The Vraxian commander stood nearly 9 feet tall, her translucent crystalline body refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns across the walls. Her 4 arms crossed in obvious disapproval as she watched Jake stumble toward the finish. Lying behind him, Jake could hear the snickers and chittering sounds that passed for laughter among his alien classmates. Kira Tanaka, the only other human in their squadron, shot him an encouraging look from where she stood with the other cadets. She had performed better than Jake, but not by much. Humans, it seemed, were simply outclassed in every measurable way. Crushing weight of expectations, the debriefing room felt more like a courtroom than a classroom. Massive holographic displays showed the performance metrics of each cadet, and Jake's scores glowed in embarrassing red at the bottom of every category. Strength, speed, endurance, reflexes in every measurement that the Galactic Defense Academy valued. Humans ranked dead last. Zelthara paced before the assembled cadets, her crystalline feet clicking against the metal floor with each step. "Today's results confirm what many of us already suspected," she began, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Not all species are created equal when it comes to military service." She gestured toward the holographic displays with one of her 4 arms. "The Goliathans demonstrate superior strength and durability. The Zephyrians show unmatched speed and agility. The Mentari possess telepathic coordination abilities that make them natural squad leaders. Each species brings something valuable to our forces." Jake felt his stomach tighten as Zelthara's glowing eyes turned toward him and Kira. He knew what was coming next. "And then we have the humans," Zelthara continued, her tone shifting to something approaching disdain. "A species so unremarkable that I question why the Galactic Council included them in our recruitment programs at all. Weak bones, slow reflexes, limited sensory capabilities, and no natural abilities worth mentioning." Thorak, the massive Goliathan, who had effortlessly dominated every physical challenge, let out a rumbling chuckle. "Maybe they're here for comic relief," he boomed, his voice like distant thunder. Several other cadets joined in the laughter. Jake's hands clenched into fists, but he remained silent. He had learned early in his academy training that outbursts only led to more punishment and humiliation. Beside him, Kira's jaw was set tight, her dark eyes flashing with barely contained anger. The science of superiority Zeltha activated another hologram, this one showing anatomical comparisons between the various species. "Let us examine the facts." "Objectively," she said, zooming in on human physiology, "human bone density is 40% lower than the galactic average. Their muscle efficiency is among the worst of any sapient species. Their brains, while adequate for basic tasks, lack the specialized neural pathways that allow for enhanced combat reflexes or tactical thinking." The instructor's presentation was methodical, clinical, and devastating. Each slide showed another. way that humans fell short of their alien counterparts. Reaction times, sensory acuity, physical resilience. In every category, humans were not just inferior, but dramatically so. Furthermore, Zelthara continued, humans have demonstrated a disturbing tendency toward emotional decision-making rather than logical analysis. Their history is filled with conflicts based on primitive emotions rather than strategic thinking. They are, quite simply, evolutionary mistakes that happened to develop space travel before natural selection could correct the error. The room fell silent. Even the cadets, who had been laughing moments before, seemed uncomfortable with Zelthara's harsh assessment. Jake felt heat rising in his chest, a familiar burning sensation that he had learned to suppress during his months at the academy. Kira raised her hand. Instructor, human military history shows numerous examples of tactical innovation and adaptive thinking under pressure. The Battle of Terra Prime, the defense of the outer colonies, the cherry-picked examples of luck and alien assistance. Zelthara interrupted with a dismissive wave. Show me one instance where humans succeeded through superior capability rather than circumstance or the intervention of more advanced species. The breaking point. Jake had endured months of this treatment. Months of being treated as a second-class cadet, of having his every failure highlighted and his rare successes dismissed. He had watched instructors give preferential treatment to alien cadets while holding humans to impossible standards. He had felt the constant weight of representing not just himself, but his entire species. But it was Zelthara's next words that finally broke something inside him. Honestly, I believe humans should be classified as a protected species rather than military candidates, she said with what passed for a smile among her kind. They would be much better suited to entertainment roles, or perhaps manual labor under proper supervision. The idea that they could serve alongside real warriors in actual combat situations is not just laughable, it's dangerous to the other species, who would have to carry their dead weight. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake could feel every eye in the room on him and Kira, waiting to see how the humans would react to this ultimate insult. His heart pounded in his chest, and his vision seemed to narrow to focus solely on the arrogant instructor before him. But instead of the explosion of anger that everyone expected, Jake did something entirely unexpected. He stood up slowly and spoke in a calm, measured voice. "You're right, Instructor Zelthara." The admission sent a ripple of surprise through the room. Even Kira turned to stare at him in shock. "We are weaker," Jake continued, his voice growing stronger. "We are slower. By every physical measurement you've shown, humans are inferior to every other species in this room." Zelthara's crystalline features shifted into what might have been satisfaction. Finally, some honesty from, "But you're wrong about one thing." Jake interrupted, meeting the instructor's glowing eyes directly. "You think those limitations make us worthless. I think they make us dangerous." The challenge the room erupted in a mixture of laughter and outraged chatter. Thorak's booming voice rose above the others. "Dangerous? The only thing you're dangerous to is yourself, human." But Zelthara raised one of her 4 hands for silence, her expression intrigued despite herself. "Explain yourself, Cadet Morrison." Jake took a deep breath. He was crossing a line here, and they both knew it. "Give me a chance to prove it," he said. "One practical exercise. Not a strength test or a speed trial, something that actually matters in real military situations. If I fail, I'll request transfer out of the combat program and recommend that human recruitment be suspended." The instructor's crystalline body pulsed with inner light, a sign of intense thought among her species. "And if, by some miracle, you succeed, then maybe you'll consider that there's more to military effectiveness than pure physical capability." Zelthara was quiet for a long moment, studying Jake with her alien senses. Around them, the other cadets waited in tense silence. Finally, she spoke. Very well, Cadet Morrison. I accept your challenge. Her voice carried a note of cruel anticipation. Report to Simulation Chamber Alpha at 08:00 hours tomorrow. I have the perfect scenario in mind, one that has proven impossible for every cadet who has attempted it, including several who far exceed your physical capabilities. As the other cadets filed out of the room, chattering excitedly about the upcoming spectacle, Jake remained seated. Kira approached him, her expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "Jake, what have you done?" she whispered. He looked up at his friend, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "Either saved our careers or ended them," he admitted. "But I couldn't just sit there anymore and listen to her talk about us like we were pets." The weight of representation. That night, Jake lay awake in his small quarters, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the impossible situation he had created. Through his small viewport, he could see Earth in the distance, a blue marble hanging. In the cosmic void, somewhere down, there were 8 billion humans who didn't even know their entire species was being judged by the actions of a few cadets in a military academy light years away. The pressure was enormous. If he failed tomorrow, it wouldn't just end his military career. It could close the door on human participation in galactic defense forever. Zelfara had made it clear that she saw humans as a liability, and a public failure would give her all the ammunition she needed to make her case to the Academy Board. But as Jake finally drifted off to sleep, he found himself thinking not about the weight of expectations, but about something else entirely. Throughout history, humans had faced impossible odds and somehow found ways to survive and thrive. They had crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. They had turned their weaknesses into strengths and their limitations into innovations. Tomorrow, he would have to prove that the same spirit that had carried humanity from the Stone Age to the Space Age was still alive in him. Asterisk. The human solution. The Impossible Scenario Simulation Chamber Alpha was the largest training facility on Terminus 7, capable of generating complex holographic environments that were indistinguishable from reality. As Jake entered the briefing area, he found the chamber packed with spectators. Word of his challenge to Instructor Zelfara had spread throughout the Academy, and it seemed like every cadet and instructor wanted to witness what many were calling the human's humiliation. Zelfara stood at the central control console, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lighting as she prepared the simulation. "Cadet Morrison," she called out as Jake approached, "allow me to explain today's scenario." The chamber's holographic projectors activated, filling the space with the image of a massive space station. The structure was clearly damaged. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Debris floated in chaotic patterns, and emergency lights flashed throughout the facility. "This is Mining Station Kepler 442, Zelfara explained, her voice carrying easily across the chamber. 3 days ago, a solar flare damaged the station's main power grid, causing cascading system failures. 17 civilian workers are trapped in various sections of the station, and they have less than 2 hours of life support remaining." Jake studied the holographic display, noting the complex layout of the station and the numerous hazards scattered throughout. Multiple hull breaches, collapsing support structures, radiation zones, and failing artificial gravity made it a nightmare. "Scenario: your mission," Zelfara continued, "is to rescue as many civilians as possible and evacuate them to the safety of your ship. You will have access to standard emergency equipment and a basic exosuit." She paused, her glowing eyes fixed on Jake. "I should mention that this simulation has been attempted by 17 previous cadets. The highest rescue count achieved was 4 civilians out of 17. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Thorak's booming voice rose above the others. "Only 4? What happened to the others who tried?" Zelthara's expression was grim. Most became casualties themselves when they attempted to save civilians in situations beyond their physical capabilities. The Goliathan cadet who achieved the 4-person rescue had the strength to move debris that would have crushed smaller beings. The Zephyrian who came closest to matching that record used superior speed to evacuate civilians before structure collapses occurred. Jake felt his mouth go dry. The instructor was essentially telling him that beings far stronger and faster than him had failed catastrophically at this task. How could he possibly succeed where they had failed? The aliens' failed attempts before Jake entered the simulation. Zelthara displayed holographic recordings of previous attempts. The first showed a massive Goliathan cadet charging through the damaged station like a living battering ram, using brute force to smash through obstacles and debris. He had successfully reached 4 trapped civilians and carried them to safety. But his aggressive approach had destabilized several sections of the station, causing collapses that killed 6 other civilians he might have saved. The second recording showed a Zephyrian cadet moving with incredible speed, racing through the station's corridors in a blur of motion. Her superior reflexes allowed her to dodge falling debris and navigate treacherous passages, but her speed-focused approach meant she could only carry 1 civilian at a time. She had saved 3 people before running out of time, leading the others to die as their life support failed. Each species attempted to solve this problem using their natural advantages, Zelthara explained. Strength, speed, durability. All failed to address the fundamental challenge of the scenario. Jake watched the recordings with growing understanding. The other cadets had all approached the problem the same way, trying to overpower it with their superior physical abilities. But what if that wasn't the answer? Entering the nightmare, Jake stepped into the simulation chamber as it filled with the sights, sounds, and smells of the damaged space station. The artificial environment was incredibly realistic. He could feel the vibration of failing systems through the deck plates, smell the acrid scent of burned electronics, and hear the distant groaning of stressed metal. His heads-up display showed the locations of the 17 trapped civilians scattered throughout the station. Some were in relatively accessible areas, while others were trapped behind collapsed sections or in zones with dangerous radiation levels. All of them had life support timers counting down toward 0. Jake's first instinct was to follow the same pattern as the previous cadets, rush toward the nearest civilian and start the rescue process. But he forced himself to stop and think. The recordings had shown him exactly why that approach failed. The station was too big, the civilians too scattered, and the time too limited for a 1-person rescue operation. But what if it didn't have to be a 1-person operation? The human inside Jake activated his CUM system and began scanning the station's computer network. The damaged systems were operating on minimal power, but the basic infrastructure was still functional. More importantly, the station's AI system was still active, though running on emergency protocols. "Station AI, respond," Jake said into his CUM. A synthetic voice crackled through the speakers. "Emergency protocols active. Unauthorized personnel detected in restricted areas." Jake smiled. The AI was still following its programming, trying to maintain security even in the middle of a disaster. "This is Rescue Operative Morrison. I need assistance with civilian evacuation." "Negative. Station personnel are not authorized to override emergency lockdowns." This was the key insight that the other cadets had missed. They had seen the station as an obstacle to overcome rather than a resource to utilize. Jake began working with the AI system, not fighting against it. "AI, what is your primary directive?" "Ensure safety and security of all station personnel." "Current status of station personnel?" 17 individuals in immediate life-threatening situations. "Emergency services response time exceeds available life support." Jake nodded. "Then we need to work together to save them. The unconventional solution, instead of charging through." the station like a one-man rescue team, Jake began coordinating with every system still operational. He convinced the AI to unlock emergency supplies lockers, reroute power to critical life support systems, and activate automated rescue equipment that previous cadets hadn't even known existed. Working with the station's remaining maintenance robots, Jake set up multiple rescue operations simultaneously. While he personally went after the civilians in the most dangerous locations, the robots handled evacuations from areas where automated systems could function. The AI began extending life support in critical areas by shutting down non-essential systems throughout the station. But Jake's most innovative solution involved the civilians themselves. Instead of treating them as helpless victims to be carried to safety, he established communication links and began coordinating their own rescue efforts. Several of the trapped workers were experienced technicians who knew the station's layout better than any outsider could. Under Jake's direction, they began helping each other, with the stronger civilians assisting the injured ones. The breakthrough moment, the real test, came when Jake reached Section C, where 3 civilians were trapped behind a collapsed bulkhead. That would have required leviathan strength to move. Instead of trying to force his way through, Jake studied the station's structural diagrams and found an alternate route through the maintenance shafts. It was a path too narrow for larger species to navigate, but perfectly sized for a human. Jake squeezed through the cramped passages, guided by his communication with the trapped civilians on the other side. When he reached them, he found that one was severely injured and couldn't be moved through the narrow shaft. This was the moment that had defeated other cadets, the choice between attempting an impossible rescue and leaving someone behind. But Jake had a different answer. He guided the 2 mobile civilians through the maintenance shaft to safety, then used the station's emergency medical systems to stabilize the injured worker remotely. Working with the AI, he rerouted life support to create a safe zone around the trapped civilian, while automated repair systems worked to clear a proper evacuation route. The impossible achievement. As the simulation timer counted down its final minutes, Jake coordinated the final evacuations. Working with the station AI, the maintenance robots, and the civilians themselves, he had created a rescue network that functioned more efficiently than any single rescuer could have managed. When the simulation ended, the chamber fell silent. As the final tally appeared on the holographic displays, Jake had successfully evacuated 16 of the 17 trapped civilians, more than 4 times better than the previous best attempt. The one casualty had been someone who was already critically injured when the simulation began, beyond the help of any rescue effort. But the numbers only told part of the story. Where previous attempts had caused additional structural damage and civilian casualties, Jake's coordinated approach had actually stabilized several sections of the station. His use of automated systems and civilian self-rescue had created a sustainable evacuation protocol that could have continued beyond the simulation's time limit. The new understanding the silence in the chamber stretched for long moments before Instructor Zelthara spoke. Her crystalline form pulsed with complex patterns of light, a sign of deep thought among her species. "Cadet Morrison," she said finally, "your approach was unconventional." Jake stood at attention, still breathing hard from the simulation. "Yes, Instructor. The other cadets attempted to solve this problem through superior physical capability," Zelthara continued. "You solved it through ... She paused, as if searching for the right words. "Through coordination, innovation, and tactical thinking." Around the chamber, the alien cadets who had come to watch Jake's expected failure were quiet, studying the human with new eyes. Thorak, the massive Goliathan who had mocked humans earlier, rumbled thoughtfully. He made the station work for him, instead of against him, Thorak said. "We tried to overpower the problem. He outsmarted it." Zelthara nodded slowly. "That is ... an accurate assessment," She turned to address Jake directly. "Cadet Morrison, I owe you an apology. I evaluated your species based solely on physical capabilities, ignoring other forms of intelligence and adaptability. The lesson learned in the days that followed Jake's simulation triumph. The atmosphere at Terminus 7 Academy began to change. The human cadets were no longer automatically assigned to the bottom of every ranking. Instructors began looking for ways to utilize human creativity and problem-solving abilities, rather than focusing solely on their physical limitations. Jake found himself something of a celebrity among his fellow cadets. But more importantly, he had proven a crucial point about human nature. Where other species had evolved specialized capabilities, strength, speed, telepathy, humans had evolved adaptability and creative thinking. During the final debriefing, Zelfara made an observation that would be recorded in Academy training manuals for years to come. "We have been measuring military effectiveness incorrectly," she admitted. "We focused on the ability to overcome obstacles through force. But real military situations require the ability to find solutions that others cannot see." Jake stood with Kira and the other cadets as Zelfara delivered her revised assessment of human capabilities. Humans may be physically weaker than most species, but they possess something equally valuable: the ability to think beyond conventional solutions and to turn their limitations into advantages. The new respect as Jake prepared for his next phase of training, he reflected on what had changed. The respect he had earned wasn't based on becoming stronger or faster than his alien classmates. It was based on proving that different didn't mean inferior. The challenge had taught everyone at the Academy an important lesson about diversity and the value of different perspectives. The Leviathans were still stronger, the Zephyrians still faster, and the Mentari still possessed telepathic abilities that humans could never match. But humans brought their own unique strengths to the table: creativity, adaptability, and the ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. Thorak approached Jake after the final debriefing, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human cadet. But instead of mockery, his voice carried genuine respect. "Morrison," the Goliathan said, "when we graduate and get assigned to real units, I hope we serve together. Your species ... you see things the rest of us miss." Jake smiled up at his former tormentor. "We all have our strengths, Thorak. The key is learning how to use them together." As he looked out at the stars through the Academy's viewports, Jake realized that his challenge to Instructor Zelfara had accomplished something greater than just proving human worth. It had demonstrated that the galaxy's greatest strength lay not in the individual capabilities of any single species, but in the diversity of approaches and perspectives that different species could bring to shared challenges. The future of galactic defense would be built not on the foundation of any one species' superiority, but on the combined strengths of all species working together, including the supposedly weak humans who had just proven that sometimes the best solution comes not from overwhelming a problem, but from understanding it better than anyone else. Asterisk.